Hey everyone, Professor Leis here. In this video, I'm going to read through and explain the prompt for major essay project number 2. What I'm going to do is read through the main portion of the prompt, and then I'll go back to break it down and explain it and clarify it. So let's go ahead and get started. Find a written text that argues an opposing position to yours on a social or political issue about which you hold a strong opinion. In an essay of at least 4 full pages, explain to readers why the author of the text holds the position they do and what values connect to their position, using background information and textual evidence to support your claims. In Understanding Arguments and Reading Them Critically, Chapter 1 of Everything's an Argument, Andrea Lunsford and John Ruskovich write, rhetorician Krista Ratcliffe recommends that we all learn to listen rhetorically, which she defines as a stance of openness you can take in relation to any person, text, or culture. This is easier said than done, they admit, especially when emotions and disagreements run high. However, it is essential when we seek to understand arguments with which we disagree. Lunsford and Ruskovich go on to write, learning to listen rhetorically and beginning to find some small commonality is usually a better way to argue constructively than plunging right in with accusations or dramatic claims. You are not arguing for or against the author's position in your selected written text. Instead, you are challenged to listen rhetorically to this opposing viewpoint to determine the underlying values this writer holds that would motivate or influence their argument. To do this, you will need to characterize the author's argument fairly and sympathetically without judgment. This essay project is your chance to put into practice all of the key concepts we've been reading and learning about so far this term. Be sure to review your notes and reread important selections we've covered from Everything's an Argument. Resist your familiar habits and practices as writers, try something new and exciting. Follow your curiosity, take risks, and attempt to have fun while composing this essay. Okay, so let's go ahead and break this down. So what you're going to do is conduct a little bit of research. You're going to find an article or an essay that's written about an issue, whether it's a political issue, a social issue, that you have a strong opinion about, okay? So it should be something that you care about and you have strong views about it, not something that you're kind of wishy-washy on, something that you hold a strong opinion on. But the article or essay that you select should be arguing against your position. It should be espousing a viewpoint that you disagree with, okay? So that's really key. And I'm going to make another video to show you all how to find those articles or the written text that you select, or at least one way to go about doing that. But that's step one. We're going to need to figure that out. And then, of course, we're going to compose an essay of at least 4 full pages. So by the time we submit our polished drafts, it should be the 4 full pages where we explain to readers why the author has this position. Now, in order to do that, we need to understand the underlying values that the author has that would motivate that position. And of course, we're going to need to back up our claims and our analysis with background information and textual evidence, meaning we're going to need to quote from the article. Now, you don't necessarily need to do outside research. The only source that you need to have is your written text that you selected, okay? Now, you might choose to do a little bit of outside research to kind of maybe get a better sense of who the person is, who the writer is, or maybe you need to do some research to understand some of the concepts a little bit, but you can write a perfectly successful essay without doing the outside research, with only focusing on that one text, okay? Now, here's some context from Everything's an Argument. This strategy, what we're employing in this essay, is we're practicing that rhetorical listening skill, approaching something with a stance of openness in order to seek understanding. So we're not trying to cast judgment on it, at least not in this essay. We're trying to understand it, and in order to do that, we need to approach it with that stance of openness, right? So we're reserving judgment. We're not casting judgment on it. We're trying to understand it. So this is a key thing here. If you're arguing against the author's position, if you're writing an essay where you're trying to prove that person wrong or why they have a faulty position, then you're not addressing the prompt. So keep that in mind. So what you're going to need to do is examine the argument closely and determine what the underlying values are that are motivating that, right? And so in order to do this effectively, you need to be able to characterize the author's argument fairly, meaning you're not like calling it stupid or belittling the argument. You're characterizing it fairly and accurately, seeking to understand it without casting judgment on it, okay? Now, of course, this is going to be difficult because if it's about an issue that you hold a strong opinion, of course we have strong opinions about it, right? But we want to reserve that. We don't want to make this an opinion essay about why that person might be wrong or why their position might be faulty or why we are right. That's not the purpose of this essay project. Okay, so the challenges for this essay. In this major essay project, we are challenged to write an essay with a coherent and purposeful structure and organization that resists the limiting nature of the 5-paragraph essay structure. So this is something that we are striving to do in our first major essay projects. We are not writing a 5-paragraph essay. So if our essay is only 5 paragraphs and if we're following that structure where we have our hook with the thesis in the intro paragraph and then our 3 supporting body paragraphs and then just summarizing it all in the conclusion, then we are falling into that trap of the 5-paragraph essay. We're in college, we're moving beyond those training wheels, right? So we need to be able to reflect the sophistication of our thought in a sophisticated structure, right? So that doesn't mean that we're getting rid of structure. We want to make sure that we still have a coherent and purposeful structure and organization, but it needs to move beyond the limiting nature of the 5-paragraph structure. We're challenged to include specific and relevant examples and textual evidence from our selected written text that help develop the essay's central point. So the central point is addressing this prompt, right? All of that is what we're striving for, what we're trying to do in this essay. So we need to make sure that we include specific and relevant examples from the article, from the source that we're analyzing, and textual evidence, so meaning that we have quotations incorporated into our essay. And this leads into the next challenge. We're challenged to integrate quotations effectively using signal phrases and providing context or background information to introduce these quotations. So to integrate means that we build it in to the structure of the essay. It fits in the essay, right? It's not just thrown in there and treated like an afterthought. It's built into the essay. So we want to make sure that we integrate these quotations effectively. And one way to do that is we want to make sure that we're using signal phrases. So some basic kind of signal phrase patterns would be according to so-and-so, and then you have your quotation, or as so-and-so puts it, you have your quotation. So-and-so states, you have your quotation. All of those are what we call signal phrases. They act as transitions and they give your reader a heads up that you're about to quote, and they're also indicating who the quote is from or where it comes from. We also want to make sure that we're providing context for these quotations. Imagine that you have a portion of your audience who has not read this article that you're analyzing. So in order for them to understand your essay, you need to fill them in and provide that context or background information. What are the quotations referring to so that your reader will make sense of that? It will sound good to them or make sense to them. We're challenged to write at least 8 purposeful and organized paragraphs, each one focusing on a distinct point or idea that helps develop the overall point of the essay. So again, the overall point of the essay is addressing that specific prompt in the first paragraph here. So this key phrase, at least, means minimum. Okay, so you need to have a minimum of 8 purposeful paragraphs, but of course you can write more. So I encourage you to write more if you think that's appropriate for your analysis. But we want to make sure that we have at least 8 purposeful and organized paragraphs, each one having a distinct point or job to do in your essay. So we want to think consciously about that. What is each paragraph doing in your essay? Now, leading into this next challenge, we're challenged to treat paragraphs as a unified progression of ideas rather than disconnected items in a list. So if we are treating them as a disconnected items in a list, this is what I call the listing effect, where it just seems like each paragraph or point is kind of like, here's a point, and then here's another point, and then here's a point after that, and how about this other point? But we're not showing how all of those points connect or are related to one another. That's something that we want to avoid. We want to avoid doing that. So we want to treat our ideas, our paragraphs, as a unified progression of ideas. So think of each of your paragraphs as a link in a chain. So each link should point to the one that came before and the one that comes after, right? So how does one idea lead into the one that follows? How is it all working toward greater understanding or moving toward kind of the overall point of your essay? We're challenged to show a strong awareness of audience and purpose. In other words, our rhetorical situation. So what are we trying to do in this essay project? What's the purpose of this? That's the prompt. That's the purpose. That's what we're striving to accomplish. But we also need to think about who is in our audience. Of course, I am, as the professor, I'm the chief reader of this, but you want to also envision a wider kind of hypothetical audience. Of course, you might envision your colleagues in the class. You might envision people who also care about the issue. You might even envision the author of the article you're analyzing. All of those are potential members of your audience. So you need to make sure that you're addressing their expectations. You're anticipating things that they might need to know in order for something to make sense. You're also considering the tone you're taking. You want to make sure that you're inviting your reader to read along. You don't want to come off as standoffish or arrogant or rude or like you're being, yelly, kind of a colloquial way to say that. So all of those things go into the rhetorical situation, and of course that's one of the things we've been reading and learning about from Everything's an Argument. We're challenged to have a conclusion that does not simply summarize the main point, but instead addresses the so what question. Why do these ideas matter? What's the overall significance? What can the reader take away from this essay? So for this, there are a lot of ways that you can approach it, but you might think, why is it important that we've read your analysis about this particular position that this writer has? Why do we care about the values that might be motivating this particular person to make this argument? All of those things factor into that so what question. Why is this important? Why does this matter? What's the significance of these things? We're challenged to create a purposeful title that alludes to the focus of the essay and follows the title, subtitle format. So this first part of it was something we were striving for in our first major essay projects. So it should be a title that has a distinct purpose. So we want to be a little creative with that, but also make sure that it does indicate what the point of the essay is, or the focus of the essay, so that when your reader reads that title, they can determine if that's something they want to spend their time reading, right? That's one of the chief functions of a title. Now the second portion, the title, subtitle format, this is a convention of academic writing that we are going to now begin to incorporate in our essay projects. Now I'll include some more resources and explanation for this, but just for now, that's something that we're going to need to strive for in our titles. We're challenged to show ownership and pride over our work, taking care to eliminate major or distracting spelling, grammatical, and typographical errors. So I've mentioned this before. Whether we like it or not, the things that we produce and put into the world are representations of us as people. Now we can not like that fact, but bottom line is that is the case, right? Especially with a written piece of work. So in order for this to be a good representation of you as a person and all the hard work that you put into this, you want to make sure that you're demonstrating that you take responsibility for it, right? So you're taking ownership over the things that you're creating. And one way to do that is to make sure that we're eliminating those major or distracting spelling, grammatical, and typographical errors. So proofread. Make sure that you are proofreading your essays. And one effective way of proofreading is to read out loud. So I don't mean just kind of whispering to yourself so no one can hear. actually reading out loud, like how I'm reading out loud, so that you can hear the way the words sound. We often forget that language was first spoken, and so it should sound good, right? So if something doesn't sound right, that means there's something there that could be addressed. We're challenged to format our essays according to MLA guidelines. So this means 12-point Times New Roman font, double spaced for the entire document. So everything should be double spaced, no additional spacing between paragraphs or extra spaces between your title and the main text, and it's just double spaced the entire document. That's what MLA calls for, so we want to make sure that we're adhering to that. 1-inch margins on all 4 sides, top, bottom, left, right. Not 1.5 inches, not 2 inches, 1-inch margins on all 4 sides. And of course, we need to have a properly formatted works cited page for this essay because we're dealing with that written text that we're analyzing. Of course, we're going to be incorporating quotations from that text. We're going to be citing it. We need to have a works cited page that is properly formatted according to MLA guidelines. For due dates, because I'm making this video for multiple classes, due dates don't align. You're going to need to check your individual prompt for the due dates. But our schedule will be very similar to major essay project number 1 as far as like the spacing between drafts. Now note, this is very important, and I'm going to be more stringent on this since we're now almost midway through the semester. For this major essay project, you must submit all drafts by expected deadlines in order for this project to be considered complete. If you cannot meet an expected deadline for any one of these drafts, refer to the project deadlines and submissions policy in the syllabus. So for this, we're going to have 3 drafts, just as we did for major essay project number 1. So we can't skip any of those drafts. We can't neglect to submit draft 1 and then hop on draft 2. That's not going to be okay. We need to submit all 3 drafts. Now, as per my policy in the syllabus, I'm happy to grant extensions, but you need to talk with me ahead of time in order for that to work. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be more stringent with this. I'm not going to accept any late work, okay? So unless we arrange those deadlines. So make sure that you read through that project deadline and submission policy in the syllabus so you're clear on that. And here's my works cited page. Not quite MLA. Okay, everyone, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to address them for you. Otherwise, happy writing. Have fun.